Most preppers will run out of sanity long before they run out of food, and nobody talks about that. You have got the water, you have got the calories, you may even have the firepower. But when day 14 of a real crisis hits and the walls start closing in, when your kids stop sleeping, when arguments ignite over nothing, when the people under your roof start to unravel, none of that gear saves you. What saves you is something almost nobody stocks deliberately. 15 specific comfort items that protect your household's psychological stability when everything outside is falling apart, not for a long weekend, for 3 weeks or longer. Think of this as psychological first aid for your stockpile. It is the category most preppers skip entirely, and it is the gap this video closes right now. The American Red Cross and SAMHSA have both documented that behavioral health issues are among the most common serious consequences that follow a disaster. Nearly every person inside a crisis-affected area experiences some form of emotional impact. For most people, those reactions stay temporary, but only when certain baseline conditions for psychological stability are in place. Calories and clean water are not enough to create those conditions. What creates them are small, deliberate acts of normalcy woven into your prep from day one. These 15 items are not luxuries. They are field-tested tools for keeping your household functional when sustained stress starts tearing people apart. Before diving into the list, understand why the mind often cracks before the supplies do. Physical survival gets almost all the attention in prep communities. The psychology of a long-term crisis gets almost none of it. That is a critical failure point, and the evidence is consistent. FEMA's Crisis Counseling Assistance and Training Program, run in partnership with SAMHSA, exists specifically because the behavioral health fallout from disasters is real, documented, and predictable. Physical survival without psychological stability produces outcomes nobody wants. Stress, anxiety, helplessness, and degraded cognitive function have been documented in communities where physical needs were fully met, but psychological ones were not. Experts who study slow burn scenarios, extended grid-down events, prolonged economic disruption, multi-week displacement, consistently report that mental stability starts deteriorating within 2 to 3 weeks when no comfort anchors exist. SAMHSA's disaster behavioral health research confirms that psychological first aid becomes critical the moment normal support systems fail, routines collapse, sleep degrades, decision quality drops sharply, people in your group stop working together effectively. What prevents that cascade is not complicated, it is intentional. So what are the 15 items? Let us go through each one. Item 1, instant coffee. A sealed container of instant coffee has a shelf life that is effectively indefinite when stored correctly. That single fact makes it one of the highest value, lowest cost morale items available to any prepper. Accounts from veterans who spent time in extended field operations are nearly unanimous on this. A cup of hot coffee in the morning is not really about caffeine. It is a ritual. It signals to the brain that the day has a structure. That structure matters enormously when the environment around you has none. The budget math is straightforward. A 200-count box of quality instant coffee packets runs under $15 and occupies less space than 2 paperback novels. The return on that investment during a 2-week grid-down event is difficult to overstate. Stock more than you think you need, because coffee is also one of the first items to gain serious barter value in a prolonged supply chain breakdown. Item 2, tea. Stock several varieties alongside your coffee. Chamomile carries documented mild calming properties, which matters when anxiety is elevated across your household. Green tea delivers a gentler stimulant effect for people who find full-strength coffee too intense under stress. Store both in sealed, airtight containers away from direct light and moisture, and rotate annually, even though neither degrades quickly under proper storage conditions. Together, coffee and tea form what experienced preppers call morning ritual infrastructure. The act of preparing and drinking something warm and familiar at the start of the day performs psychological work that is completely out of proportion to its cost. Do not underestimate it. Items 3 and 4, hard candy and chocolate. The University of Georgia Cooperative Extension Service, which is one of the country's primary references for emergency food storage science, lists hard candy and chocolate bars as shelf-stable comfort items worth including in any emergency kit. North Carolina State Extension uses nearly identical language in their own disaster preparedness guidance. These are not fringe prepper opinions. They are documented recommendations from credentialed food science programs at land-grant universities. Hard candy serves two distinct purposes. First, it provides an immediate psychological lift, something sweet and familiar in an environment that offers very little familiarity. Second, it delivers a fast glucose source when appetite is being suppressed by sustained stress. Chocolate bars add both morale value and real caloric. A single 100-gram bar of dark chocolate delivers roughly 500 calories, which matters significantly when you are rationing and physical demands are elevated. The mistake most preppers make in this category is guilt about stocking treats. Set that aside entirely. Comfort foods are not indulgences in a crisis. They are documented contributors to morale maintenance. Stock what your household actually wants and will eat. Rationing familiar treats lands far better than distributing survival bars nobody asked for. Items 5 and 6, spices and bouillon cubes. Eating the same beans and rice every day for 3 weeks will start to feel like punishment by day 10. That is not a complaint about pickiness. Appetite fatigue is a documented phenomenon that leads people to undereat, lose physical capability, and decline psychologically at the exact moment when they need all of their resources. Spices weigh almost nothing. A compact collection, chili powder, garlic powder, Italian seasoning, cumin, and a few bouillon cubes takes up minimal space and transforms a monotonous emergency meal into something edible. The psychological shift from eating to survive to eating with some degree of satisfaction is worth far more than the physical weight of those spices suggests. Bouillon cubes store for 2 or more years in a cool, dry location. They dissolve in heated water to produce a warm, salty broth that addresses both hydration and the powerful psychological comfort signal of a hot drink. In cold weather scenarios especially, hot broth as a midday option can shift group morale in a measurable way. Do not skip this category. It is one of the most space-efficient investments on the entire list. Items 7 and 8. Soap and dental hygiene supplies. This is where the gap between short-term thinkers and long-term preppers becomes obvious. Most people stock just enough soap and toothpaste to last the first week. That is not preparation for a real extended situation. Feeling clean is tied directly to feeling human. When infrastructure fails and hygiene begins to degrade, morale drops in proportion. Military doctrine has understood this for generations. Field manuals across multiple branches of the armed forces emphasize personal hygiene not only for health reasons, but explicitly for morale maintenance. A person who feels clean has a measurably different psychological state than one who does not, even in identical physical circumstances. Should stock 4 to 6 months of bar soap per person. That number sounds excessive until day 30 of a grid-down event when the last bar is gone and functional bathing has not been possible for weeks. Solid bar soap stores indefinitely when kept dry. Antibacterial varieties add an infection control layer that matters when medical access is limited or unavailable. Dental hygiene deserves equal attention. A toothache or a gum infection during a prolonged crisis is not a minor inconvenience. It degrades sleep quality, concentration, and emotional regulation severely, and professional dental care may be completely inaccessible. Stock toothbrushes, toothpaste, and floss generously. The cost is measured in cents per day. The cost of dental deterioration in a crisis is measured in capability you cannot afford to lose. Items 9 and 10. A deck of cards and physical books. A standard deck of playing cards is small, cheap, requires no power, and can provide hours of genuine distraction and engagement. That assessment holds across every serious prepper resource that addresses the challenge of downtime management in extended scenarios. Boredom is not a trivial issue in a prolonged crisis. Idle hours with no structured activity generate anxiety, rumination, and interpersonal conflict within groups. A single deck of cards supports dozens of different games across any group size. It weighs nothing, takes up almost no space, and lasts for years in a dry environment. It also provides something that is easy to underestimate, an excuse to sit together and interact in a way that is not driven by stress or logistics. That social function is real and valuable. Physical books are the underrated companion to the card deck. A standard paperback novel weighs under a pound and provides 8 to 12 hours of genuine mental engagement per volume. Stock what your household will actually read. Nonfiction survival reference books also belong in this category. They serve dual purpose, useful information when you need it, and something constructive to do when stress is climbing and there is nothing actionable in the moment. Avoid over-relying on digital entertainment in your planning. Tablets and phones drain batteries. Battery resources during a grid-down event are finite and valuable for more critical functions. Physical media requires no power at all. That is a genuine operational advantage, not nostalgia. Item 11. Quality wool socks. The wool socks appear consistently across multiple serious survival resource lists, and the reason is grounded in basic physiology. Cold, wet feet generate disproportionate misery and accelerate physical fatigue faster than almost any other form of minor physical discomfort. Warm, dry feet have the opposite effect. The psychological lift of warm feet when the surrounding environment is cold and uncomfortable is real and measurable. Merino wool socks manage moisture better than cotton and retain insulating properties even when they cost more per pair than synthetic alternatives, but the morale and physical comfort return over extended wear is significant. Stock at least 3 to 4 pairs per person and rotate them deliberately. Socks wear out. In a prolonged scenario, worn-out socks that are not replaced create a physical discomfort problem that compounds daily. Item 12. A hot water bottle. This one surprises people. A standard rubber hot water bottle costs $2 or less, weighs almost nothing, and delivers one of the highest morale returns per dollar on this entire list. Fill it with heated water before sleep, water you are already heating for drinking or cooking, and place it at the foot of a sleeping bag or under a blanket. The improvement to sleep quality is significant and immediate. Sleep deprivation is not a minor inconvenience in a crisis. It is a direct threat to cognitive function, decision-making speed, and emotional regulation. Those are exactly the 3 things you cannot afford to compromise when the situation around you is demanding your best performance. A $2 hot water bottle that gives you 1 extra hour of quality sleep per night is one of the most effective investments in this entire kit. Items 13 and 14, a journal and candles. Journaling during a prolonged crisis serves 2 functions that most people do not consider until they actually need them. The first is psychological. Writing down what happened today and what decisions were made, what the group's status is, what resources were consumed, creates structure that fights the formless anxiety of open-ended uncertainty. FEMA's crisis counseling program specifically encourages coping strategies that build structure and meaning-making during disaster recovery. Journaling is one of the most portable and cost-free tools for doing exactly that. The second function is operational. A written record of resource consumption, water source quality, group health observations, and security notes carries genuine tactical value during an extended situation. The journal that keeps someone psychologically anchored also becomes an operational log. Those two purposes do not compete. They reinforce each other. Candles address a need that tactical flashlights and LED task lighting do not touch. Ambient, warm light that signals safety and normalcy. A lit candle in the evening hours, when stress typically peaks, changes the psychological register of a space in a way that cold overhead lighting simply cannot replicate. The human nervous system responds to warm, low light as a cue for safety and rest. That response is hardwired. Stock unscented pillar candles for long burn time. If space permits, add a few scented varieties. Pine, vanilla, and cedar activate memory associations that have a documented stabilizing effect on emotional state. Familiar scents ground people in positive associations and create a brief but meaningful psychological reset. Store candles in sealed bags in a cool location. Never leave them unattended and keep a fire extinguisher accessible wherever they are used. Item 15. Tailored items for children, elderly family members, and pets. The 14 items above apply to most adults with minor adjustments. This 15th category is not optional if your group includes children, elderly members, or animals. It requires its own dedicated planning lane. For children, familiar comfort items from home carry far more psychological weight than any adult morale item. A stuffed animal, a recognizable book, a small puzzle, or a favorite snack translates directly into reduced anxiety and improved sleep. FEMA and the American Red Cross both document that children's responses to disaster are shaped heavily by how the adults around them behave and by whether familiar objects and routines can be preserved. The National Child Traumatic Stress Network is explicit. Maintaining familiar objects and routines is critical for preventing post-traumatic stress responses in children during and after disasters. Pack deliberately for children. Let them participate in the preparation process, where their age makes that appropriate. The act of preparing together creates a sense of agency and reduces fear, which is itself a morale tool. For elderly family members, prescription medication rotation planning sits at the intersection of medical necessity and psychological stability. The anxiety created by running critically low on a necessary medication during a crisis is severe. It is also entirely preventable with advanced planning. Consult a pharmacist about legally building a rotation supply wherever that is possible. Maintain a complete, written list of medications, dosages, and prescribing physicians inside your emergency binder. That document has value beyond the medications themselves. It gives caregivers critical information if the primary patient cannot communicate it. Pets deserve deliberate attention. Formal preparedness literature often underestimates their role, but the Red Cross and the American Psychological Association both recognize companion animals as genuine contributors to their owner's psychological stability. A calm, well-fed animal creates a stabilizing effect on the household. A stressed, hungry one creates problems you do not need during an already demanding situation. Stock a minimum of 2 weeks of pet food and include familiar treats in the supply. your pet's stability directly. So now consider the barter dimension of comfort items, because it compounds their value significantly. Historical collapse scenarios, from post-World War II Europe to Venezuela's prolonged economic breakdown to Argentina's hyperinflation crisis, consistently produce the same trade pattern. Coffee, cigarettes, chocolate, alcohol, and hygiene products became hard currency within weeks of normal supply chains failing. Most of the items on this list carry barter value that stacks on top of their personal utility. A deliberate stockpile of instant coffee, hard candy, quality soap, and sealed spices represents both personal morale insurance and real trade capacity for items you need and did not anticipate. That dual-purpose calculation is exactly why experienced long-term preppers stock comfort items in quantities that exceed personal consumption. The practical guideline is this: stock enough for your household's use across your target scenario length, then add 20 to 30% more of the highest trade value items, coffee, hard candy, and quality soap. Store that additional supply separately in sealed containers with dates marked clearly. Do not draw from the trade stock until you have a reliable read on how long the situation will last and what resources are actually circulating in your area. Here is the core principle that holds all of this together. The physical stockpile is the foundation. Nobody disputes that water, calories, medical supplies, and security matter first. But a household that maintains physical survival while losing psychological coherence is not truly prepared. It is just delayed. The breakdown still comes, it just arrives a few weeks later. Your mental state is as much a part of your preparedness as anything on your shelves. Preparing for psychological stability helps your household endure the crisis, maintain identity and cooperation, and avoid the helplessness that causes people to make catastrophic decisions under stress. The items that support psychological health cost less and take up less space than almost anything else in your entire kit. There is no logical reason to skip them. Tonight after this video, walk through what you have already stocked. Count the morale and comfort categories represented. If fewer than 5 categories from this list are in your current stockpile, that gap will not announce itself until day 20 of a real situation, when fixing it is no longer possible and the window for correction has closed. Add one item this week, then another the week after. The stockpile that keeps your household functional and psychologically stable is ultimately the one that gets used effectively, and a prep that gets used effectively is the entire point. Think about this for a moment. What would your household look like on day 18 with none of these items versus having all 15 deliberately stocked? The physical supplies would be identical, the experience would not be. That difference is where real preparedness lives. So here's your action list in plain terms. Add instant coffee and tea this week if they are not already in your kit. Add hard candy and chocolate in quantities that go beyond what feels reasonable right now. Build out your spice and bouillon supply until variety is genuinely covered for 3 weeks. Audit your soap and dental hygiene stock against a real multi-month timeline. Put a deck of cards and at least a small selection of physical books into your kit today. They are cheap and irreplaceable without power. Pick up several pairs of merino wool socks per person and a $2 hot water bottle. Add a blank notebook and a supply of candles with a fire extinguisher nearby. Then build out the tailored category for every child, elderly person, and pet in your group specifically and deliberately. The gap between a household that survives a prolonged crisis and one that fractures under the same physical conditions is rarely about calories. It is almost always about this. The intentional comfort layer that signals normalcy, preserves dignity, enables sleep, and keeps people cooperating when everything outside is pressing against them. This is not a soft concern sitting at the edges of real preparedness. It is a central pillar that has been documented by FEMA, the Red Cross, SAMHSA, and land-grant university extension programs. The evidence is not new. The mainstream prep community has just been slow to absorb it. You now have the full picture. 15 categories, the reasoning behind each one, the barter logic that extends their value beyond personal use, and the evidence base that makes this a legitimate preparedness discipline rather than a personal preference. The people who stock these items are not soft preppers. They are complete preppers. There is a meaningful difference between the two, and it shows up in the outcomes. If this video added something practical to your prep plan that was not there before, give it a like. It helps more people who need this information actually find it here on my channel. Every week on this channel, there is something concrete and actionable you can implement immediately. Nothing here requires a special budget or unusual access. Every item on this list is available to you today. The only question is whether you act on it before you need it or wish you had after. The answer to that question is entirely up to you.